So, like I said, a useful thing to do would be business requirements analysis, right? In which we discover things such as objects that would be useful in the system. We can discover individual attributes, like data attributes of these objects. We can also discover our use cases. So essentially, what are the set of features? Collection of use cases, like all of use cases, becomes a requirements model, also known as functional specification. Right? The requirements model, functional specification is pretty much kind of the same thing. But the most important thing is that it's the collection of all use cases well described, which can also be prioritized in order of importance. What needs to be implemented first, next, and more like towards the end. All right. So in the process of visualizing these use cases, we also discover actors, right? And we said that the actors, we can analyze relationship between actors and use cases in a form of this pictorial view of like an actor with some kind of name, like user, right? And then they can actually execute a number of use cases in the system, kind of like silly picture like this. And also we need to remember that there is a boundary between the user and the system, so we can visualize what happens outside and what happens inside. So the system can be displayed as a box over here, and inside is all the functionality that the system can have. So this is business requirements analysis part of what we do. So then, as we become more firm about understanding the set of use cases, okay, we are now becoming more clear about the set of use cases that we're going to have. The next stage is use case analysis. And use case analysis is, again, taking the objects that we have, right, and describing them more formally as classes of objects, right, because we know that when we use programming language, we will be creating classes of objects. And then use case analysis presumes that you can analyze individual use cases, and use cases will have a main scenario, some kind of extensions. It's like, okay, everything goes well, then something happens unusual, and what we do about that. So we say that we can discover extension scenarios. And these main scenarios, extension scenarios, are all go to into an individual use case, right? So this individual use case right here, right? This one individual use case will have these, potentially have the main use case scenario and then extensions. Okay, right? And later on, we'll also talk about the fact that there is a possibility that use cases themselves can be related, like they could be including one another. Now, more about that when we go through some other examples of this. This is just trying to think. I'm trying to think about this big picture, going from design to implementation. So finally, as we becoming more and more clear about the interactions and all of the necessary parts that we need to understand about the individual use cases of the system, The next stage would be perhaps design patterns, pattern analysis. In other words, this part, right? So this business requirements, use case analysis, design pattern analysis would be, we want to find out what prepackaged solutions might already exist, maybe already formally described elsewhere. So design patterns are prepackaged solutions. And in all of these stages, like business requirement analysis, use case analysis, design, pattern analysis, we're trying to use, perhaps we'll be using UML. So UML will be our friend to stay as formal as possible to visualize our thinking and help our descriptions of what we're trying to work through, essentially visualize pictorially to like what we're trying to do, right? And so finally, there is heavy stages of implementation that are happening, right? So there's lots of programming happening, and naturally there will be now people who are responsible for testing, and of course it's programmer initially who is also responsible for testing, is that we're going to do some testing of what we're trying to do. So testing happens somewhere over here. Right? But interestingly, that this is not exactly a top-down model, right? All of this usually happens in iteration. Like you're trying to do some programming, you discover some gaps and unknown questions, so you jump right back to this stage. Going back to this stage, you realize that, oh, wait a minute, I have to go all the way back to here, and maybe I forgot the entire use case to add to the system, because we just somehow overlooked something, right? So we go back to use case analysis. Use case analysis, of course, may be impacting what classes we want to have, right? So this could be going back to this stage and say, hey, let's do some work over here. As we change our design, add classes, modify use cases, we have to be updating our documentation. We have to be updating our diagrams, ideally, because those things actually become very quickly outdated as we go through some heavy programming, and we have to come back to the programming, right? So we go from here back to directly to the implementation. And so typically this kind of circling around these different parts of activities, right? Maybe taking place sometimes 5 or 6 times, sometimes even more than 5-6 times. But an average is actually, like, people from practice know that it's like 5-6 times that you go back and forth as you become more steadier. And of course, at some point, programming becomes your, perhaps 80% of your activity finally is programming. So now you're just like finalizing everything. Everything falls into place, and you're really doing most of your programming. And of course, at this stage, is most likely then what happens is that at some point you really need to do more work with testing, right? So testing becomes really highest priority right now, because you need to validate everything. And at this point, it's not just a programmer testing, but perhaps good quality assurance personnel who understands the business domain, who understands the requirements of this business and all of the business rules. They will get on and will try to stress out and create those scenarios that really kind of put a system through the whole test, right? But I think my idea to trying to talk about all of these parts is to tell you that it's really a highly iterative process, very interactive process, right? So everybody needs to be on board. Everybody needs to be aware of what's going on, what the challenges are, what kind of roadblocks or unknowns you hit. So this is really, it's kind of stressful sometimes, right? Because some things may fall apart. People could disagree on things, right? People could say, no, we should do it a different way, and so forth. I think, so let's record this segment.